in Blender, the critical aspect is displaying bones as solid and paying attention to your bone naming.
Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be covering bones in Blender for absolute beginners. Now keep in mind, there are some things I'm not covering here. So I'm not going to be covering like constraints and relationships between bones and all that sort of stuff. This is just the absolute basics, getting you to understand the concept of taking an armature in Blender, adding it in, and how to make it deform a piece of geometry. And we're even going to be touching a little bit on weight painting, so how you can influence how much the bone influences this. So this is an absolute basic one. So if you already know kind of some things about rigging, this is going to be extremely boring for you. But if you're absolutely new and you want a video that just takes it step by step and makes it simple for an absolute beginner, this is definitely a video that is going to benefit you. So keep watching and I'll show you how to do rigging in Blender. So to best demonstrate this, let's go ahead and select all the default objects. We're just going to press delete and let's go Shift A. Let's go to our mesh options, add in a circle. And let's just quickly go to our add circle options here. And let's just give it something like 12 vertices. Now we're just going to go drop that down and we're going to go into our edit mode. And with all of this active, we're just going to go E to extrude and Z and extrude it up. And let's take it up about this high, just so we have a nice long cylinder. Now we're going to go Control R, hovering over here. And we're just going to click once and then again. So 2 times left clicking to add in this loop here with Control R. Then we're going to come here to our loop cut options. And let's just go something like 15. And now we have some nice little, a bit of topology here that we can bend around. If you want to, you can just go ahead, Shift Alt, left click to select the edges here, or just go F just to fill them, and then go Control B just to create a bevel. And you can grab the bottom here as well and go F and then go Control B just to create a bit of a bevel. So what we have here is just a simple object to demonstrate with. So I'm going to tab back out, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go Shade Smooth. So what we want to do here is we want to add in some basic bones, parent this mesh to those bones, and then deform the mesh by moving those bones. This is an absolute beginner's tutorial. So we're just really focusing on just the very basics. So what we're going to do, we're going to go Shift A, and this time we're going to go to this option here called Armature. Now there's all these bunch of options I have because I've enabled some different add-ons in Blender, but the one we're focusing on is just a single bone. So you can create your own system here. Now what you have here is just a single armature that's added in, and kind of look at this armature as a package, right? Currently, if you go Z and you go wireframe, you just have this one single bone here. But if you go into edit mode of that bone selected, inside of here in this, you can kind of create like a whole system or network of bones, right? So for example, this is a bone in here. So let's just grab this top little nub. Let's go G and go Z to move it up. You can also grab the nub down here and go G and move that around. Or you can just left click on this whole bone and go G to move that around. You can also rotate. So anything you can kind of do with mesh, you can do this. You can even grab a nub at the top here. And just like you can go in edit mode, you can go E to extrude that as well. So I'm just going to undo that for now. So what we're going to do is we're just going to grab the tip of this bone and just bring it up a little bit. And then we're going to go E to extrude and Z. We're going to extrude up on the Z to about here. And then we're going to go do it again. And let's go again. And then one more time, we're just going to extrude up like so. So now we have some bones. We need to almost think about this like the vertebrae inside of an animal. The less amount of bones you had, if we only had like, I'll quickly demonstrate, if we only had like 2 bones in here like this, we'll only be able to have a point here where it can deform over here because this bone can rotate and this bone can rotate at this point, but there's no in-betweens. Now, there are some bone options which we're not going to get in today, and these are called bendy bones. So bendy bones are different, and I'll quickly just overview this because we can add in bendiness to an individual bone. So even though we'd only have 2 bones, it makes it possible for this to be more bendy than it can actually be. But for today, we won't get really into that too much. We're just going to keep it really simple with the default octahedral bones in Blender. Okay, so I'm just going to delete these, just trying to get some basic concepts across. So now that we have these bones here, let's quickly go over here to our pose mode. Now the pose mode is a bit different because as we are able to go into edit mode and actually create bones and extrude them, distribute them, the pose mode here gives us the ability to pose those bones. Now what's unique about the pose mode is if you go into pose mode and you would actually move one of these bones, unlike in your edit mode over here, if you select that bone, you can, in this case, I rotated it, so I can go Alt R to reverse that rotation and set it back setting back the transforms, right? So pose mode is where we would come into pose. I just want to make sure we understand the difference here between edit mode and pose mode. Inside of pose mode as well is where we can add some transforms, but don't worry about that too much right now. For now, just keep in mind that if you want to move this whole system of bones, we can grab the very bottom bone and then go G to move it. Now the reason we can't just grab one of these bones up here and press G to move it is because there's a hierarchy. And a hierarchy works like this. So this is the first bone we had in our scene in edit mode, and we started extruding from that bone. And where we're extruding from, that creates a hierarchy by default, because this bone that we extruded from this bone is connected to it, and the bone we extruded from that was connected to this, and so on and so forth. So this is a hierarchy. And in Blender, you can change these hierarchies, but we won't get into that right now. Let's just get to what we really want to look at here, and that's how to deform the cylinder. So let's go back into object mode. And let's grab this cylinder. And what we're going to do, if you want to parent something into bones in Blender, you always have to grab the mesh first. And then holding in Shift, you select your bone system. Then you're going to go Control P, and that brings up your parenting options. Now, Control P we use for all other sorts of parenting in Blender. But now when you do it in this situation, you're going to see some more options. And that has to do with armature deform. So these ones here. So we're going to go with automatic weights. And now, if we grab the cylinder, we go over to our modifiers, we can see Blender is automatically added in the armature modifier, and it's already given us that object is the armature here that's selected, okay? So now what we can do, we can grab this bone set and we're gonna go into pose mode. And now we have the ability to go in here and rotate these bones. And you can see here, we're deforming. Now the reason it looks kind of bad like this is because Blender has done its best job here to try and do them by default, but we can do it a bit better. So I'm just gonna press A to select everything, go Alt G, Alt R, Alt S, just to reset any transforms. Let's go into pose mode, and with this bone structure selected, we're just gonna hold in Shift and select our mesh. Then we're gonna go to object, and now we're gonna see we have a weight paint option. And now what we can do is we can go Z, we can go to wireframe. If that doesn't work, let's just come over here and toggle on our X-ray so we can see our bones. And now if you hold in Control or Command, you can left click on a bone and you can see its weight properties. So in this case here, you can see we currently have the draw enabled. So let's just use the draw and let's just draw onto here. And anything that is red or warmer in value is gonna have more influence. So if this bone here, everything that's warmer, it's gonna be more influenced by this bone. So in this case, we wanna probably go like this, and just paint up to where that bone kind of ends over there. But all this influence here, we want to get rid of it. So what do? We go over here to the brush option, we go to subtract, and now we can paint away. So the less warm the values are, closer to this blue over here, the less influence we're going to have. So now I'm painting all of this away, as you can see over here, right? And what we can do, you can hold a Control and select the next bone. And we can do the exact same thing. We can go grab the add brush, and let's just paint around here, just the mesh we want influenced, like that. And let's go ahead and paint away over here, like so. Okay, and then Control, click on the next bone. And this is a really good, I know this is really basic and might be a bit boring for some people, but keep in mind that this is just a very good way if you're absolutely new to kind of learn how to do this, okay? Because there are going to be times where the Blender's default weighting system isn't going to work that good. You need to be able to come in here and kind of manually set things up. So that's why I'm showing you this very basic example, just as a good starting point for you guys to learn how to do this. So just real quick, finishing this off like that. And let's just grab this guy at the top, holding Control, and just paint that nice and warm. There we go. And just quickly subtract these bottom bits like that. Okay, so now let's go back into our object mode, select our armature, and let's go into pose mode. And now let's give it a shot. Okay, we can come here and grab it. Now you can see that's deforming a lot more like what we want. There's still a little bit of influence here. I obviously rushed that, but you guys kind of get the idea here. Now we have a cool way of controlling this, and that's really awesome. So another thing we can keep in mind, let's just say, for example, we grab this top bone and rotate it, and this one here, right? Let's go back into object mode. At the moment, this is looking a little bit rough. So we can actually come here to our modifiers. We can give it a subdivision surface modifier on top of the armature. Now, it is possible to put the subdivision surface modifier first, but that's not good practice. It's always good to put it after the armature here. And now you can see it has smoothed it out quite a bit. And this is kind of like the really, in a nutshell, the really basic concept of adding bones in Blender and manipulating a piece of mesh using that bone. We're not going to even get into constraints and all these other things here, because there's so much more that could be said about bones in Blender and how they work and how you can set up hierarchies and stuff. But this is just getting the fundamentals across. And just one more thing, if you want to be able to see through without having wireframe or X-ray, you can just go over here with your armature selected and go to your bones. Go to viewport display, and I think you can go, or maybe you have to go here to your object data properties, and then you have to go to in front under the viewport display, and then you will always see through no matter where it is located. So that is the basics of bones for absolute beginners in Blender. And like I said, there's a lot more you can learn. And if this has kind of given you a basic idea, you can check out some of my other tutorials that cover this in a much more advanced kind of way. I'll see you guys next time.
In most cases where you are not dealing with humanoid, it would be advisable to use the skin modifier instead of the armature. We will look at both and compare. Armature modifier. The armature modifier is used for building skeletal systems, rigs, for animating the poses of characters and anything else which needs to be posed. By adding an armature system to an object, that object can be deformed accurately so that geometry does not have to be animated by hand.
What's going on, guys? Blender Bench here, and in this video I'm going to give you guys a brief introduction to rigging inside of Blender 3.0 and above. So you're inside of Blender, you have your character created and you want to make it move. Now how do you go about doing that? Now the process is called skinning in the industry, and that's basically the process of binding your character's mesh to the skeletal section. So in Blender it's called armature. So in order to create an armature, which is basically the spinal region or the bones that make the character move, we're just going to press Shift A. First, let's go to the front view. So we're going to press 1 on the number pad on the keyboard, press Shift A, and we're going to go to armature. And quickly you see we have this pyramid attached to a couple of spheres. Now I'm going to change the mode so you can see this a little bit easier. Now we want this to be the first bone, so we can press S to downscale this, press G, then Z to move this up, and we'll start this somewhere around here, around the navel area and pelvic area, right in the middle. And we need to create bones throughout the entire body where it would move. And these spheres act as a pivotal point to make the character bend in certain directions. So what I want to do is, while we have our bone and armature selected, change the mode from object to edit. And if you select any of these balls here, you can use the move tool to move it around. And I'm going to press Ctrl Z to go back, and I just want to bring this down a bit, and I'll leave one here, and I'll press E to extrude, and I'll press Z to constrain it to the Z axis. And I'll make one about here. So wherever you want your character to bend is where you want the spheres or ball joints to be. And every character is different, so you can have as many as you like. And all, say if you're doing a snake, it wouldn't be the same as a human. So that's also why doing it this way is easier and more customizable versus just using some type of rigging add-on, you know. So with that being said, let's create a couple more. Press E. Now press Z, and I'll move this here for the neck. I'll press E one more time, press Z, and this is for the head. I'm going to select this one here at the bottom, press E, and I'll just bring it out because I want the leg to be able to move around here, around this upper thigh area. I'll press E once again. I'll bring this down to the knee area, press E once again, and we're going to extrude this out to the ankle where that rotates and moves. And I'll press E once again for the lower foot if we want one there. Now let's press the number 3 to go to the side view, and you see we have to line these up a little bit better. So let's choose the knee, drag this in this way, right in the middle. Grab this ankle joint, put that right there, and we have the foot, which we can leave there. That looks fine. Change the spinal area. Let's go here. Drag this back a little bit to be more in the middle. Grab that throat bone here. We're just going to slide this over. And the head is fine where it is. Now let's go back to the front view by pressing the number 1 on the number pad on the keyboard. And let's get a collarbone going. So from this ball joint here, I just want to press E, extrude. And I'll bring this somewhere around here. And if you want, you could do a collar. It really depends on the character you want and how you want him to move. And this is fine for me. Leave it here. For the shoulder rotation area, press E once again, and we'll bring this down to the elbow. And we'll bring another one out for the wrist. And I'll do another one just for the hand. I'm not going to do fingers, but I'll just leave this here. I'll press number 3 on the keyboard, on the number pad, so we can line this up a bit better, right? So choose that shoulder, press 3, drag this over to about here, drag this elbow over here, grab that wrist, and the hand right there in the middle. We can bring that up a little bit higher. Now, one more thing I think I should bring up. Let me actually go back. Let me fix this a little bit. There you go. And typically I like to use my, I like to model my characters in the T pose, but I grabbed this one just for the example, and he's also in the A pose, which makes it a little bit difficult to weight paint this later on, and you'll find out what that is here shortly. So one more thing we need to do is set up a naming convention so we can mirror this skeletal mesh here, which is the armature, on the opposite side. And to do that, what you want to do is select the bone here, press F2, and give it a name that's unique, but you want to have the suffix .l, right? So we'll name this pec.l, hit enter. We'll name this shoulder, so F2, shoulder.l, enter. Select this one, F2, forearm, .l, enter. We'll select the last one here, the hand, so we'll F2, hand.l, enter. And now what we can do is press A, and it selects all the bones here, the entire armature. And we want to press F3, and then type in symmetrize. And I already have it here, so I can just select it. And you see now it's mirrored on the opposite edge. But notice how we didn't name these thighs, so that didn't get mirrored over. And that's how you know that the naming convention is really specific in Blender. So let's Control Z to go back before we mirror that, and let's just rename these thighs. So F2, thigh.l, enter. And I'll say F2 leg.l, enter. And F2 foot.l, hit enter. Pelvic.l. And now what we can do is press A, and it selects all the bones here, the entire armature. Let's press F3, symmetrize. There you go. We have the symmetry on both sides. It looks great. Now we need to go about making this move. So if we change the mode from edit mode to pose mode, select a bone, rotate it, nothing happens. Now we need to do the skinning section, and that's when you bind the character to the armature. So to do that, you want to go to object mode. So now that we're back in object mode, what I want to do is select the mesh first, and then shift select the armature, press Control P, and I want to parent this with automatic weights. And now if I go to pose mode and select a bone, Now I can move the character by the armature's positioning. And you can also see that where the ball joints are, the character rotates off of that pivot point. So let's change the mode back to regular. And you can see we have a rigged character. And it's just that simple. So hopefully you guys found this video, knowledgeable. You guys learned something. And let's say we got some artifacts in this character mesh, or if you wanted to weight paint this yourself and not do the automatic, there's ways to go about doing that as well. And like we learned in Blender, everything is important, so the order matters. So if you select the character first, let's go back into object mode. Let's select the character mesh, and then shift select the armature. Go back to wireframe mode. And we go to object mode. You see we only have 3 options. But let's select the actual armature first, and then select the mesh and go to object, drop down. You see we have more options. And now we have the weight paint option, and you can see how this works. So if I go to wireframe really quick, so you can see the armature underneath, we can toggle through each bone and see what's affected by pressing Control and selecting that bone. And very quick, you see that we have this color convention going on: red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. And that's just how much an area is affected, by the actual bone. So if you go to this thigh bone here, hit Control and select, you see that this area is affected by the bone, red being the most intensified, then it goes lower to orange, then even lower to yellow, then green, then blue, then you see dark blue, it is unaffected at all. So let's Control select another area like the forearm, and you see what's affected. Now, there's more menus that you can do. If you press N on the keyboard, you can bring up the menu, and you can go to Tools, and here you see the weight here. So red, I told you, is 100%, so it's 1. So if I wanted to paint this area to be affected, we have that. And if you want to erase that, and you just drag the weight down, you see it turns more green. And if you bring it all the way down to 0, it's going to be blue, which is erasing it. So for instance, you guys saw that these characters move properly with the bones, but I want to show you if you did have an effect, how it will look. So let's go to weight, and let's change this forearm to affect this torso area. So we have that selected. Let's change the mode from weight back to object mode. I'm going to select the armature, go to pose mode, because that's the only way you can actually animate this is in pose mode. And you saw that I changed the torso to be affected by this arm, and now you see that there's some artifacting going on and some deform issues, because this forearm now controls the torso area. And remember, to fix that, you want to select the armature and then the character, and then go to object mode, and you can go to weight paint. And then we can just bring the weight down to 0. And we can fix these issues. So let's go back into object mode, select our rig, which is our armature, go to pose mode, and now there's no artifacting. We have a little piece here, which I probably missed, but it's fine because you guys can see how it works a lot better now. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I'll give it a thumbs up, comment if you liked it, and share it, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.
Skin modifier. The skin modifier uses vertices and edges to create a skin surface, using a per vertex radius to better define the shape. The output is mostly quads, although some triangles will appear around intersections. It is a quick way to generate base meshes for sculpting and/or smooth organic shapes with arbitrary topology.
What's up, guys? Justin here with the CGEssentials.com, back with another Blender modifier tutorial for you today. So in today's video, we're going to talk about how to use the skin modifier in order to create base meshes for sculpting and other things like that. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. So this is an interesting modifier. It does some kind of interesting things that I could totally see being useful for some applications and completely not useful for others. So I do recommend that you go first check out the documentation in the Blender manual. It talks a little bit more about how this modifier works, and then give it a try. So what we're going to do to start off is basically this modifier uses vertices and edges to create a surface. So let's say, for example, and I have the extra shapes add-on enabled, so I'm just going to select the option to add a single vertex. We'll make sure we're in vertex select mode, and then I'm just going to extrude that vertex up a couple times on the Z-axis, and then I'm going to tab back into object mode right here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the modifiers. We're going to add a skin modifier. So it's going to be down here. We're going to click on skin. And so if you look at this, it doesn't look very remarkable, right? So all it's really done is it's come in here and it's just added some quad geometry around that edge. And so let's turn on wireframe mode because it's going to help us see what's going on in here. So basically what this is doing is this is coming in here and it's adding geometry, and maybe we want to go into wireframe mode as well, but it's adding geometry around that vertex. So let's say that we were to go back into edit mode. I'm going to extrude this out a few more times. And now let's go back into object mode. And so you can see how what this does is this is basically just generating this geometry around this vertex. So it's really giving you quad geometry around a vertex. And it does do some interesting things like kind of pinching around these corners, other things like that, that are going to vary based on what we're trying to do in here. But in general, that's what this is going to do. And so that gets a little bit more interesting if we tab back into object mode, and let's go right here into wireframe mode, and let's extrude this off in a couple different directions. So let's extrude something along the x-axis over here. Let's select this vertex and extrude something along the x-axis over here. And then maybe we'll extrude something off of the y, or up the z-axis over here. And so now if we look at this, what this does is this basically adds triangles where necessary at these intersections, but it still gives you this kind of quad shape. And so a lot of the time what you're going to do is you're going to take this and you're going to bring this in and create the quad geometry, and then you're going to add a subdivision surface modifier after the fact. Because what that does is that gives you more that gives you more of a smooth surface. But notice how if you move these different parts and pieces around, the skin that's being created is going to move around with them. And sometimes you can get some kind of odd results at these intersections of the geometry where the vertices kind of split off. But it gives you some kind of interesting base meshes to play around with. And so there's a few different things that you can do to adjust this as well. So let's turn off our subdivision surface modifier. So first off, you can smooth the branches using the branch smoothing option. What that's going to do is that's going to try to smooth out the geometry at these areas where it kind of shoots off on the different branches right here. So it's going to relax the settings in here, basically like shrinking those down so that they're not taking up as much space, and just trying to smooth everything out. So the symmetry function is really just going to affect the topology that's created. So it basically tries to avoid making unsymmetrical quads in here, and sometimes it does that by creating triangles. You can see how by toggling this X value right here, I'm getting different topology in here. I don't know how much you're going to use that. I think a lot of this one is kind of playing around with it and seeing the results that you get, but that is an option that's in here. So smooth shading is pretty much exactly the same as right-clicking on something and clicking Shade Smooth. All right, and so one really important thing that you need to know how to do when you're using this modifier is how to control the size and the scale of the vertices. So for example, let's go in here and let's go back into wireframe mode for a second, and I'm going to tab into edit mode just so you can see that I'm selecting this one vertex right here. And so right now you've got this one vertex, and this is generating a box around the vertex right? Well, what you can do is you can select a vertex and do a Control A and move your mouse in order to adjust the size of the object that's created on the vertex. And so what that's going to do is that's going to give you a lot more control of the object that's created. So if we go back into this mode right here, do a Control A with that vertex selected, notice what that's doing is that's adjusting the size of the skin that's created around that vertex. And so that can be really important. So let's say, for example, that we had this cube with the skin modifier. So if I tab into edit mode and do an A to select all the vertices and then do a Control A, you can control the size of the skin that's created in here by doing that Control A with all those vertices selected. Well then, notice how you get this really interesting effect. So you can use this to create, different like pipes along paths and other things like that as well. So for example, let's say that we were to duplicate this vertex right here and then extrude it. And so I can do a Control A to adjust the size right here. And so what that does is that gives me a lot of control over the mesh that's created. All right, so now let's take a look at a practical example of where we might use this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into object mode. I'm just going to do a Shift A and I'm going to add an extra or a single vertex. We'll just move it over here. So then inside of edit mode, let's extrude this up, across, down, just like this. So what we've got in here is a number of different vertices, right? Well now, let's add a skin modifier to it, like this. Well, notice what that's doing is that's basically creating kind of a very high level person shape. And then you could come in here and you could kind of adjust this just by doing a Control A with the different vertices that's in here. It's like this. So notice how this is creating kind of a general skin. Then let's go ahead and add a subdivision surface modifier to it as well. But one of the things that you might do is you might select this object, and I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of branch smoothing in here. But what you might do is you might use the option for create an armature. And so when you click on the button for create an armature, what that's going to do is that's going to create an armature in here that you can use for rigging. So now I've got an armature in here that's linked to my mesh. So if I was to go into pose mode, for example, and I can actually adjust this, and the skin's going to move along with it. So you can come in here and you can actually rig this as well, and the mesh is going to follow along. So what we could do, for example, is we could keyframe locations of this mesh like this. So we could use this in order to keyframe and animate different movements as well. So this will automatically do the armature setup for you inside of Blender. So this gives you a lot of like fast, high-level options for working with different meshes and creating different meshes really quickly inside of your models.
Weight painting is a process in 3D rigging that assigns influence or weight to different parts of a mesh, the surface geometry of a 3D model. This influence determines how much a particular bone affects nearby vertices on the mesh when the bone is moved. Weight painting is crucial for achieving natural deformations during animations, as it helps create realistic bending, stretching, and compressing of the mesh. Here's how weight painting typically works. Soft influence. More movement areas of the mesh that need to move flexibly, e.g., skin over joints, are given softer weight. This means the bones have a gradual influence on these areas, allowing for smooth deformation. Hard influence. Less movement stiffer areas, e.g., metal parts or bones, receive a harder weight. This restricts the bone's influence, keeping these parts more rigid and reducing deformation.
Weight painting is a way to specify the influence of each bone on the mesh. In order to weight paint in Blender, select your model, go to the weight paint. In the right hand side, in the data tab, find the bone in the vertex group that you want to weight paint. For example, if I find the spine 6, it's responsible for controlling the head As you can see, there are red areas, green, yellow, light blue, and dark blue areas in the mesh. The dark blue, it's a 0 value. It's 0% control on the mesh. And the red areas are 1 value. It's 100% control. Everything in between is between 0 and 100% control. For example, the value 0.5 means green, 0.7 means yellow, 0.2 means light blue, and 0 means dark blue. You can control the weight value from up here, the radius and the strength of the brush. A strength means how hard or soft your brush will be. You can also bring these three options on your cursor by right-clicking into the canvas. As you can see, I have weight, radius, and strength. You can also increase the size or radius of your brush on the go on your character when painting by pressing F and moving your mouse left or right and clicking on the canvas with the size you're comfortable with. This kind of painting will cause some problems because the head bone should fully control the head, but as you can see, it doesn't control some parts of the jaw and lips. If I show you the problem, go to the rig, pose mode, move the head bone, and as you can see, the head is deforming. To fix this problem, simply select your character, go to the weight paint, find the bone responsible for moving the head. In this case, it's a spine 006, and put the weight to 1, strength to 1, and paint the head with red color. It means this bone will fully control the head. If I check back, go to the object mode, select the rig, go to the pose mode, move the head bone. Yes, the head will not deform anymore because I fixed the problem and set this bone to fully control the face. Also, you can do the other way. If I want, for example, to hip move with the hand, for some reason, I don't know why, select your mesh, go to the weight paint, find the left hand bone, and just paint the areas that you want to move with this bone. For example, I want a little bit of hip to move with this hand. I just paint it here. If I check my rig, pose mode, move my hand, as you can see, the hip is moving with my hand. Sometimes this kind of problems happen. To fix that, select your model, go to the weight paint, find the bone that's causing the problem, and paint it with blue. Sometimes a little bit of light blue is there, but you might not see. Just check your bone, to the pose mode, move the hand, and the hip is deforming, as you can see. To fix this problem, select your model, go to the weight paint, move the weight all the way to 0 and the strength all the way to 1, and paint the areas. Even if you don't see the problematic areas, just paint it. Paint it with the dark blue. There are things there that are causing the problem. To check it again, go to the object mode, select the rig, go to the pose mode, select the problematic bone, and move it. As you can see, the hip does not move with the hand anymore. Okay, that's the basics of weight painting. Of course, there are a lot more to the weight painting, and sometimes you need to weight paint your character according to your needs. For example, for animations or for something you need an unusual way of weight painting. The way is the same, it just remains the experience and experimental things to know where you want to paint and how much influence and how much weight you want to paint on that area.
Let's reflect on what we have learned so far.